What's up, guys and gals, and welcome to Sunnyside TV, and today we are reviewing NBA 2K20. Now, I mostly played this on the Nintendo Switch, so it's coming from that perspective, but before I get started, I do want to touch on some of the aspects that I'm going to be covering, like career, the story, the neighborhood, park experience, my GM, and the overall performance and gameplay, but I will not be touching my team as the casino nature of it just completely turned me off, and I am boycotting that aspect of the game. But if you guys could do me a huge favor, hit that like button, sub to the channel for more game reviews, content, and check out my Twitches. I stream every single Friday. I stream 2K. But without further ado, let's take a look at NBA 2K20.
Listen, he knows he should have made that shot. We'll see if they can work it back to him in that.
To get started, the gameplay this year is largely the same from my experience in 2K20. 2K has touted that there's an upgraded motion system which has made its changes to the dribbling, how players collide based on weight and height, and while this has all been largely true, it hasn't necessarily been a good thing so far in my playthroughs. While some of it is for the positive and it's no longer an automatic miss upon collision with another player, for instance when you're going up for a layup, a lot of the times it felt clunky coupled with the weird animations and the fact that everything just feels slower. Honestly, it made for a poor experience in my opinion compared to 2K18 and 2K19. On the positive, while I am terrible at dribbling and I mostly play centers, I do want to say that the dribbling does feel smooth this year and the animations seem to feel more slick and purposeful. There is some small changes like seeing where a player is going coming off a screen, and 2K has touted some new AI improvements featuring dynamic freelance, an engine that makes players on the court smarter when they play alongside you. But unfortunately, while I noticed some small changes, I feel this still needs to be improved on. For instance, as a guy who mostly plays at the center position, I still feel the players don't space correctly when I'm backing down a player in the post, and they don't cut or they don't move to a good open spot on the court when I'm being double teamed in the post. But I will say that it's a little better than 2K19 when I would see 4 players on my side of the court running near me, and when I'm trying to back down a player in the post one-on-one. So there's definitely some improvements. But overall, I feel there's minor changes to the 5-on-5 aspect of this game, whether it's in my career or you're playing in quick play. This has always been a fun aspect. Being able to play against other players online at any time is awesome, but keep in mind for the Nintendo Switch, your experience may vary, as I tried to get an online pickup game at 2 in the morning and had no luck. So not a good sign for the Switch owners for a game that just released. As for the My Career experience and the story associated with your player, there is a lot of changes and things to cover. But I'm going to start off with the story that is produced by Spring Hill Entertainment, a company run by LeBron James and Maverick Carter, and this experience was a mixed bag. The story is about you, a college player on your 4th year, hoping to make it to the league, but in your first game, a college teammate of yours goes down and he suffers some freak injuries. Your coach then ends up pulling his scholarship, and you decide to protest by sitting out the season and standing up for him, thus jeopardizing your draft status in the NBA. The story features some excellent heavy hitter actors and Golden Globe winners like Idris Elba, Rosario Dawson, and Ernie Hudson, but even all these awesome actors didn't make up for what I felt was a mostly bland story. The story is about 3 to 4 hours long, and I don't want to ruin it with too many spoilers, but the story mostly failed conveying any real drama or emotion. The closest thing that got me feeling any emotion, ironically, was the Scottie Pippen motivational speech, and it wasn't even one of the big actors.
Youngest of 12. My dad worked in a mill. Nothing special about the way we grew up, just poor folks. Sure some of you guys can relate to that, right?
Yeah.
You know, coming out of high school, I was only 6'1", 150 pounds, wet. I only received one offer, Central Arkansas, and that was to be the team manager.
But what I did like about the story mode was adding a combine while doing multiple drills, which admittedly some were a little annoying, but I loved watching my draft status move up slowly going through the story, and it was going off your performance. This year also featured more choices for you to choose in your story that would see you have different types of cutscenes, and that was a nice addition, but frankly they have a long way to go to make this part of the game more compelling. In my opinion, I would like to see them possibly go back to the basic with these stories, and instead of looking for like the big names and the big production iteration like they're starting to do every year. Scale it back for something more fleshed out, longer, with a bit more interesting story. And honestly, it's starting to feel like they're running out of unique stories to even use anymore in these story modes in my player. But as for your player creation this year, a whole lot has changed since the last iterations of 2K. This year you have a bit more control over the type of character you want to create. No longer are you choosing two different archetypes and your player is defined from there. This year you'll be choosing which categories you want to lean your players towards, whether that's slashing or an inside game, shooting, defensive, or playmaking. Once you figured out what you'll invest your points in, the different categories you want your playstyle to fit, it will then determine how many badges you get based on where you put your points. Once all that is figured out, you'll get a category that fits your playstyle, like mine, for example, is a glass cleaning lockdown. You'll also get your choice from 80 different badges to choose from as well, since you're no longer locked into a specific badge that the game forces upon you. Overall, I'm a fan of these changes as it gives the players more control over what they actually want to build and what your playstyle is, instead of cornering you with just two playstyles. Also, you can separate yourself from being a park player with certain badges that are more beneficial for the park. So if you want to just grind my career, there is badges that are more useful for you there as well. But for me now, jumping into the park play, this is what I personally play the most every year, and I have to say this was not a good experience. First off, they haven't hardly changed anything from last year's park. The layout is 100% the same with only some minor changes, like for instance a random diner. They've added some boring mini game called disc golf, and that's honestly the extent visually for the neighborhood outside of changing how some of the buildings looked. I was extremely disappointed in this, and you can tell why they waited to the very last week of release to show the neighborhood and hide it from its player base. Outside of the actual park gameplay, it does feel different. Now it's not as jarring as it was jumping from 2K18 to 2K19, but this year the biggest thing I've noticed is the characters just acting like there's a slip and slide all over the court. We're all sliding around and the character movements just feels off and clunky. Setting a screen this year feels harder than hitting a half-court shot due to how clunky all the movement is. They've also stopped letting people create their own jumper and have forced players to essentially take a shooting release badge to make shooting feel less awkward. So while they gave us more control on how to build our players, they took away the ability to customize our shots and release speed, which is a huge negative. The park gameplay overall just feels slow. It feels sluggish, and I'm basing this off most people who are at 85 overall and plus. I've been told there's going to be a patch to address some of these issues, but let's hope they do, because right now the park gameplay has not been improved on for the better. To top it off, they've also made it harder to grind badges as a pure park player, as you barely get anything after a game, thus forcing you to play NBA games. It took me about 15 to 20 park games to unlock my very first defensive badge, and I have 22 more to go. Quite frankly, I hope that this is just a bug and it's not an intended mechanic, because this will take the definition of grind to a whole new level. They've also added this annoying new mechanic that has you having to do a set of training mini games to get a weekly bonus to your attributes. To me, this does not add to the immersion. This is just a pointless weekly grind that takes away my fun from the game. They've also gated your ability to choose specifically which drills you want to use in the practice facility to work on those badges. So on top of slowing the process down of playing park games, you can't even target the badges you want if you play career, and you have to play career for a little bit to unlock specific drills in the facility. So what feels like an almost yearly occurrence with 2K, with taking one step forward, two steps back. So far, I have not enjoyed or cared for almost all the changes, coupled with the park layout being the same. To say that I'm disappointed at this point would be an understatement. I think if you're strictly a career guy and you're not interested in doing park, you're going to have a lot of fun with this. But if you're a park guy, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy this like you have in previous years. But one positive that I can give is that it's supposedly going to be faster to hit 95 now. And your grind from 95 to 99 will now go by your park rep that's revamped from the last couple 2K iterations. Now, obviously, I haven't been able to dive into these ranks, but essentially your performance and record will matter, and it will determine your overall after 95. So if you're a career guy trying to hit 99, there won't be as much of a grind refined as previous years. But to segue into the performance, I will briefly mention that my performance on both the Xbox One and PS4 have been 100% smooth, though most of my playtime has been on the Nintendo Switch. The Switch's performance for the most part is positive. There is now new added lighting effects you can visually see on the court. You can even see more of the crowd now, which is excellent, so you can tell they were trying to squeeze as much as they can out of the Switch. The game still runs at 30 FPS on the Switch, but on the other platforms it does run at 60 FPS. On handheld mode, it actually feels and looks smoother and sharper than it does on docked, ironically, so I've been happy to report that performance-wise the game has been solid. As for the bugs and glitches, well, there's almost too many to list at this point, but this is pretty much a yearly occurrence. Players loading into park games slowly, people are reporting lag when trying to enter games in career mode, there's some visual bugs, and overall the game isn't stable from a server standpoint when you bring online elements into it. I've gotten stuck and frozen multiple times, and usually all these bugs and glitches get patched out, but like usual, us players are the beta testers at launch. As for my GM mode, this was actually my first time dabbling in it, and I must say I should have dived into this sooner. I'm usually a sucker for these types of modes as I played them for years in the past, but I just haven't had a chance to pick this one up, and I was pretty impressed. You can control almost every aspect from ticket prices to hiring and firing coaches to trading players and even sponsors that will represent your team like Adidas. You'll also get a skill tree to invest in with different skills that you get from experience doing things like filling a task for your coaches or the owner. But with all that said, I know that since this is my first time you're diving into this, I can't really rate it in comparison to other years, but I definitely enjoyed my time with this. One negative that I will point out is that if you try to play the games themselves for your team, the games are locked in at 6-minute quarters, which is no good considering the stats of your players will be messed up. If you end up simulating it normally, you'll be fine, so hopefully this gets patched, as this is something that is ruining this mode for a lot of players out there who buy this game specifically for this mode. Overall, if you haven't been able to tell, my experience this year with NBA 2K20 has been a dud. I haven't even touched on the microtransactions that have gotten to be more and more egregious every year. Honestly, it feels like we are continuously being taken advantage of at this point. There is some positives. More control over your character creation is awesome. You can tell they've updated some things graphically, at least on the Switch. The addition of the WNBA players is a nice touch that I have no problem with, but as for the park experience, I guess the addition of backpacks? Unfortunately, there is more negatives than positives this year, and ultimately I've been soured more so than I have in previous years. The Switch Sport to me every year is almost proof that the people running things don't listen, they don't pay attention to the community, and what a ton of people on a yearly basis request and ask for, and not just on the Switch but any console. Unfortunately for Switch users, they have to pay the same price as everyone else for almost half the game when it comes to the park experience. My final score for NBA 2K20 this year is a 5.75 out of 10. And one of my lower scored games of the year. While people like to joke every year that it's a copy and paste game with just the roster updates, this is truly that year to make that assessment and it be the honest truth. It feels like they decided to mail it in this year more so than usual and gear up for the next gen consoles, which is what I'm guessing all their efforts have mostly been focused on. I honestly feel we all deserve better than a casino game with just a little bit of basketball thrown in the mix. And let's be honest, we all know where most of the innovation this year went into, and it has to do with slots. I truly hope that they take all that casino money and they reinvest in a better game come next year, as I'm already looking into the horizon for something better. But with all that said, and boy, that was a lot, I want to say thank you guys for watching this review. If you've enjoyed it, please hit that like button, sub to the channel if you're brand new, especially if you're into 2K content. While I do a lot of different types of game reviews, we've consistently have covered 2K here for 2 years in some form or another. So sub to the channel, hit that bell, check out my Patreon, and follow me on Twitch where I stream 2K content for our little community every single Friday. But with all that said, I hope you all have a sunny day.